Dane Jaza Dage Jenzo Jembe Zonan Rola Benze Zanje Roba Yo Zemjen Damjen Dewa Dan Deve Jodan Dembar Joj Dongar Dan Dongar Je Jodan Rawa Joje Dongar Mebe Dewa Damba Mendrawa Joje Nyere Jada Nila Rave Tanya Jembo La Neba Joje Zemje Damje Dewa Dan Deve Jada Demba Joje Dongar Dan Dongar Je Jodan Rawa Joje Dongar Mebe Dewa Damba Dam Rawa Joje Nyere Jada Nidan Rave Tanya Jembo La Neba Joje Zemje Damje Dewa Dan Deve Jodan Dambara Joje Dongar Dan Dongar Je Jodan Rawa Joje Dongar Mebe Dewa Damba Dam Rawa Joje Nyere Jada Nidan Rave Donyam Jembo La Neba Joje Nada Zemje Damje Lo Juzo Rovar Zinje Lamdo Zo Julamdo Rovar Zinje Lamdo Zo Landrba Zawara Zinje Lamdo Zo Drba Yiza Jawara Zinje Lamdo Zo Dada Zemje Damje Lo Juzo Rovar Zinje Lamdo Zo Julamdo Rovar Zinje Lamdo Zo Landrba Zawara Zinje Lamdo Zo Drba Yiza Jawara Zinje Lamdo Zo Dada Zemje Damje Lo Juzo Rovar Zinje Lamdo Zo Julamdo Rovar Zinje Lamdo Zo Lamdrba Zawara Zinje Lamdo Zo Drba Yiza Jawara Zinje Lamdo Zo Kunzang Palchen Ling Lama Lama Namla Zorwande Zanjegung Lama La Gozong Guba Jimbu Zorwande Demenelo Rangon Jubat Tsin the Drupa Nyambara Zenje Lo Jubazum Jejo Jidunde Nyamdon Dobe Yonde Bamda Ye Sanjimana Dembe Jamzen Londo Jamze Jala Guzanza Zazong Gundun Zoji Lama Da Rezon Trupto Jime Nipjinji Kandar Jumdra Dijin Heruka Barba Dorji Gyala Zorwande Rana Dondro Nije Tapjinwe Yingtikrikbe Chargon Jamsule Kota Kyanka Nangye Tsila Pep Renzen Namje Gombang Anjo Yo Wala so tini ta tere chudro namba ta linda nga zo linje de yang ta na kyo bang ha bo ma ta ba ke jin ke ga yang jorma song to ni tini nyam zum se ya yo ba ta linje de ko kap zambo tam be chu ke so ni tene pinche ta ko dendri zoko na kare zoko na ta dolen se ya ko kap chongwa de la ngarang ngu ni chudo na ba chama la thukji chi khia ta tene shoba de le khia yu te dan len de tene nga zo Namkwada nyambe simji tamji, tenda lana me bayan dabar zobo sanje jo komparan bochi tobar sa. Te chi da dagi tari tambi chu samo kan ye. Tsar yendo, zini nyamsa lamar yo, nyambe kolong sanchen cho da tokji ne, chu simba kumju da dimba goni simbar hyos. Ta te ya, de la ta kan simbar sawe chu je ramba ne, nga zo ta. Jarwa keta, jarwa khaja tabe, chu denu sam, jenang ta mandi ba yo mari, ta tinani, song jaba keta, chando da ngidong, menga ka kor mambo keta sanje dang, sancho samba dang, jinjong kepa dang, den naba tambi ki song kela mambo yoban nani, ta nga tso ke, chando ka goni, so dodo when ta nyamsa lindang kanri ko gori zen ta titoni ta sheka yori den de titon dan ko lodo number ye zon nga so ta tamong lodo number ye zen ayandra tamong chu zen ayandra ko lodo number ye zen ayandra ta kanong ki ri ta maina titon de nga so ki shoka yori tene chama ke te yanda tene sino nangs.
I thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to share and discuss Dharma with you this morning, my Dharma friends. It's evident that we did not suffer too much from impermanence between yesterday afternoon and this morning. So I thank you, and I wish you all good morning. Along with that, please clarify your motivation for listening as bodhicitta, with the thought that all beings throughout space must achieve perfect and unsurpassable awakening, and that it is in order to bring that about that you are listening to and practicing profound and holy Dharma. The Dharma with which we are concerned here this morning is, of course, drawn from the Buddha's teachings. Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings are all contained in what we call the three baskets, or Tripitaka. They can be divided into the indicative meaning and the definitive meaning. Here, we are concerned with practical instructions. Among the many instructions the Buddha gave, practical instructions on how to use the indicative meaning in actual practice. The system or the teachings concerned here are sometimes called the four thoughts which turn the mind from samsara. Sometimes they're called the four common preliminaries. In any case, that is what we are studying.
Oh, that's. Teni teri, ta nga tso, ta kharchang ke tamjar ni kawa ta tse mata pa ni ta dordipan rao hyu sambari. Te tamji ta te ke kare pin ko liri si na so so ra ke nyamyo ke thoni ka hieba yana sem na pi jibo he. Ngone ta ne ke chorwa pe ha leba he. Jibo he. Sem ma calm down zo go relaxing rao. Zo tawake pinto chenbo ngone chong thokando so zai te na te donghar jang jang samno tong de da de donghar de dewalin jor khando ngarang ge nguni samno ta na ko pe ngin ba ma de ma thu na dong zang bo ma de development song ne se ne bu tam be yo ri nga zo ta pe dokya de ma thu na example do ar ma thu na dong da ya bo den ro ka ma ri zo 대안한 일인도 대 선의 기본 정도 가르치나 담저지 물을 뭐지 좀 뭐때 르때 나랑 그감 쪽딩 그 르는데 빼자 첨보래 얘네 상내가 소소라 전화기 랩탑 간다 되니 데라 때는 따데 주주소 마성와를 토니 되니 개와를 드럽죠 개와를 드럽고 한다고 개와서야 돼 담배 취서야 돼 할 레바게 그 자친인도 가서 니좀 매와게 ya the odamar medonagi ngaso chi ni kawarindo ai darin galan dendra ke muluzambo mulurumbo chi ngone trane ke wangbo yin la jimchi de je ba changdi ba ke hale ba ke ndir top de ure chu drop tin samne ke so so de semna na trona za ke no ya te trona ke ba te matile mata ba de ju ke korndo yang gewa dukki ke jin zai se de ne de ke pin to je jong kan do gari se na mata ba min na le lo chen bo ri la ba de ngan da na le lo chen bo ri pe ma le lo chen bo le la wo zong zhi chen bo ji ma ma ri ni do ya da san do ya da da den ri la ga ya ki ro ba na den ri la ga ya ki da den ri ke ngarang ke ko che zo ge lo da wa na yin ge ma la ga ki sa jian tong jo nyar je la ga ki den ri ke ge ma ri na ta di mata ba de zai sam no tong na lama gong ba tham ji ge mata ba ji sam no tong dang la mata ba de la zai sam no tong de ngarang ge ji sam no tong de di mata ba de ge zai san na pin tho de jong de ngarang ge lama tham ji la tin di tin ri ke yo re de khong na ba tham ji re ge na mai la na kha na o ta so ge ge wa de tin ri ke na dro ko re le sa tin ri ke nyam ni se ko yo re le sam ni so so ngi chi re zai ni de teni pe sem na ji bo jong na gewa drop thaba da pe cha na te lo thaba ndaw teni ni ba na te da thaba gawe na te cheram da zoram da zo ba chim bo kare na che zo ki kare na te nyam ni se ya da te na gi san chok sem kor da te ko te zar ko kap te kare ge tin do zo de ma da ba de ge tin kan do te tin de teni ko nga hyama song de hyaro ka ma do hyama song na ya sanyi la di yu ja ro de ni pa ro de gewa drop de ke sinyam mo de la sem na ton han la kan do ao ka zang ye ma da ba te za sam de ge gewa tin ri lap chen bo drop ba nga sem na tin ri ke pin to jong song do nge tin ri ke ge lam nam tha re na lo thab de ke nga rang sem na kan ri nga rang ge dong chi ren drop song do sam ni re ke dong mi chu su som mo do sam ni ke ton han zai la kan do 또 든르케게 진세인데 동한 랩컴도 파테나 동한 라오다 거가 가레스는 마다 봐서 나 현로 사년 현로 나년 현로 휴공도 왜 이렇게 자는 힘도 그다 든르리면도 되게 소소를 삼노 든르케 코르ಕಂ도 어 대리 되게 핀침보 오늘 전에 그 토کن도 다대 지나바 탐지라 땡디 자자자게 땡이 히데 주도바보 차창의 제허들 나를 사서 지나바 샤사호 자자자리 땡아랑 거 100% 그 랍토컨도 나랑 라서 주중게 망보요리 ndi nga so ge chura tarang ge churan di na den o te ndu te teni ta nga ran so ge khar sang tamjor ge mulurum bo che kya da ne ja thok ka wa to kon ba ko ge hye ba ta te ni nyor den jeng ro wa ge ma ta ba ge yu kor tang go hye ba te ri te ge chi bo ge ma ta ba ge nyor de hye ne hye cha le la me ta wa na gi ta ga ya ko sa do pa la pa tham so wa na gi min ro ka ma ri当做个长没把什么考完了考jun了呢，今天你了考jun考完考jun呢，叫我自己领高的。他当然个当做当然考完你们先考了，考完的了，今天考jun所去全部那些，人样的考高的。他第二那些，他10斤嘛，说呢10斤那么你家能考完的了，这人考完前年些吧，当10个说个东海的些吧。Kieran Corva Donghar Kiabata, Sevra, Redo Soso Donghar Kiabalana Chori, they left they some tank calling us over Lojani Capsa. That Kieran Corvin Sini Kiabate, Tata Tianagiri. Tan Corva Dengazo, Matapa, Sanya Pachan, the Metawana Gimari. Metana Kota salary some Baranji Omarwa, Tena Gimari. Young Nasoke Namki Nasoke Chazogolo, Namkil Kelly Corva. 때 시즌 코런 걸때 코라데 gemche 카주는 소주 초모나게 보기 촌에 일런데 소주 초모나게 저던 타비니 마 천안세는 자마마보 따야리 매 천안요는 때때어 코는 초 코코 대나게 그 소주 초모나게다 번난 거 봉화나게죠 범바가 나한테 봉화 뭐 봉화를 쪼교 칼럽 야교나 대야마 협는로 하리 대야야 탱는로 하리 다 개와 득바 먹게와 싸게리긴 데바 그 마샤는 참서 제허리 가서 냐와 레토 그 동할 제로 거들 야 게임데 디마ンド와데 개와 단도 때사게 야 토리 범버도 차는로 하리 야나야 디살 탄도 사요 말이 다 든르when 디 라와나 가서 코란 라와티나 치네 디올레다 든 참서 깨바사는 로홀레다 메 륜다고 대사를 탑고나 든르when 땅가 조금 코와 동아리 점서서야데 단 뇽코로와 대인데 거르는 보지게 송로와 코와 갑지 제모라 대와남여 유마에서 든르케건 코와 동아리 점선다가 가서 김쳐 카주네 절적은 로홀레 다된 로하달레데 하고거와 하고네 되니 더소 하고 돈돈도네 되니 가서게 레점들이 이치비 갈레갈레 랩거를 되니 추드업거와 라기니까 핀토 간든 정거다 당보 추드업도 드업고야게 줌치데 가레야 마히나 다 강오 말에 되니 거 남과 동발은 다 파와나기리 대 줌치데 저 히바가 토니 저 접소나 되니 히랍게 대 히랍 저러 가서 히랍 오러와 라기니 히랍 디 히랍 때 남도 그 발라 샤마제네 남도 코랑 그 발라 뇽망바 코랑 발라 마 샤마제네 남도 그 히바 코랑 짠동 있는 되니 거 대가 하고제 거와 대인도 다 덴바 이가 거니 히인도 산제가 당보가 당보 덴바 연 콜로 거니 갑살라 동하리 히바르사 세야 된 거짱으로 왔다 가서 산제가 당보 추히인데 산제아 상제는 까 당보 추히인데 동하리 히바르사니 거짱으로 다 대히고는 콜와 동하리 당보 히고로 대히마히는 빵히고 말이 가래 빵고 가래 쓰고 대인도 다 든르케게 삼았던 거로 와서 대디토니
How many cups of coffee have you had today? Or tea?
tea
How many?
1-2 cups.
Oh, okay. I suspect that there is a significant correlation between your consumption of caffeine and how fast you talk.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. That's fine.
Thank you,
That's
thank
fine. It's good exercise. Yesterday, we briefly explored the first two of the four thoughts. The difficulty of acquisition of our precious freedom and resources, and death and impermanence. Experientially, I would say that the principal effect of these contemplations is to make us happy, to make us cheerful and relaxed. I suppose you could say that it is somewhat ironic that the assiduous and repeated contemplation of death and suffering is so conducive to happiness. We have a saying that you cannot get anywhere you want to go without understanding examples of what to avoid. So, by contemplating the first of these two thoughts, we are freed from the danger of taking our lives for granted, of living in an aimless fog of purposeless living. When we come to understand that the freedom and resources we currently enjoy are rarer than the blooming of an udamvara, it's a flower that only blooms every udamvara lojare and a lotongre once every 100 years. When you appreciate the tremendous value of your life, that produces tremendous joy, tremendous enthusiasm. Still, however, we may have to deal with laziness. Now, I'm speaking for myself here. Now, he's saying this. I'm actually lazy, but so I can say it as though it were me. He's claiming it for him. It's not true. But anyway, if I did not contemplate impermanence, I would probably never get out of bed, except to eat. I am really lazy. all I like to do is eat, drink tea and coffee, and sleep, especially sleep. In fact, it's so bad that I really prefer the company of other lazy people. I just feel at home among the lazy. However, the example of my teachers and the contemplation of impermanence gets in the way of my laziness, caused me to eventually crawl out of bed, do a little chanting, do a little meditation on the generation stage, the completion stage, and the great perfection. And even though I can't claim that my effort in this is heroic, it's enough that it makes me happy. Much happier than I would be if I simply remained do we still say slug-a-bed? Or is that's an old, if I just slug-a-bed is, anyway, it's an old, maybe it's Canadian, I don't know. If I just, remained completely lazy, slug-a-bed. Yeah, I'm going to mubagitsere.
Oh, that's it.
Tapanya la slug-a-bed. It's kind of, it's a good, it's a good word, yeah. So, if you look at the process of what enables me to somewhat overcome laziness, it's really impermanence, the contemplation of impermanence, that gives me get up and go. It's the contemplation of impermanence that adds power to the enthusiasm produced by an understanding of the value of my life. Now, I am 100% certain that each and every one of you will have the same experience if you contemplate impermanence. It sounds like it would be a colossal downer, but it is the opposite. It produces a joy, satisfaction, freedom, relaxation that nothing else can. So those two, the first two of the thoughts, help us understand, first of all, the tremendous value of our precious human lives and their fragility, how they are easily lost and will certainly eventually be lost. But we need to go further, because if death were the end of existence, then really there wouldn't be much of a problem. If physical death were the end of our story, like a fire going out, then so what? The problem, what we call the problem of samsara, is that your mind cannot die. Bodies die. Minds cannot die. They just can't. There's nothing in the mind to die. So what happens? Well, it's like a water wheel, where you have each cup as it goes. Do we call that a water wheel? Zochu? Water wheel, yeah. It gathers water, like a mill wheel that gathers, each cup gathers water, and then it turns continuously. It's self-perpetuating. And the problem with that perpetual loop, perpetual spinning, or samsara, is that no matter what happens, we go up, we go down, we never get out of it. We're like a bee trapped in a jar. You can fly up to the top of the jar, like becoming a deva. You can fly down to the bottom of the jar, like in a lower state. You can hang out in the middle of the jar, like a human being. But you can't, the one thing you cannot do, no matter how hard you try, is get out of the jar. So the problem is that whether we do good and have a higher rebirth, or do evil, bad things, and have a lower rebirth, we're never really happy. Samsara really is an ocean of suffering. As Guru Rinpoche said, there isn't enough true happiness in anyone's samsaric life to equal in size the point of a needle. There isn't that much of happiness. We need to understand this problem, because it is this problem that we address in Dharma practice. We need to understand the problem of samsara, and then we need to understand causation, what causes it. Then we can practice Dharma. Without that understanding, we're shooting an arrow in the dark. We don't even know why we're doing it, where we're trying to go, or anything. Now, among our resources is intelligence. We are all intelligent, which means, in this case, that we are fully capable of tracking, noticing our kleshas, our mental afflictions, and seeing the suffering that they cause. This is not concealed from us because it's happening in our minds, and our minds are evident to themselves. We need to do that. We need to be aware of our suffering, be aware of our kleshas. This was the first thing the Buddha said. His first sermon, as they call it, or teaching, began with his statement of the Four Noble Truths. And the first one is understand suffering. Suffering is to be understood. Because until you understand and recognize how much you're really suffering, you're not going to do anything about it.
That's okay. There is that. Don't call Donghar Ki Zone, that Nyopo the Ki or Donghar Janja Ki, don't call the Ganki Mambo or it, so sorry, share it. And Donghar Tella, Hirab Kapan Hina, Donghar the Ha Jumsi the Hakona, Natsoke, Jata Tomong Donghar Nagi Marin de Dongharte. Hirab the Hakosona, Donghar de la Pe, Pantap Devore, oh, Tendurin the Sound of Golire, Nihir Ni enjoy. Teri tanga so di tandi korwa seria dela tanga so yang the kor tata tenda yang the kor and jewa len de jewa de nga so ta chama de phama ma ze ba chik jam me sa ka thoni he ko le dra ni pha ma se ma myo wa dan dor na dra ta ni da parma samte ko thoni nga so ro da ko le dra ni par sam thoni Dinani, Tajek Pampasi, Drasin, Eris Sele, the Trangat Matavada, Nisin and Dundra Sele, the Trangat Matavada, the Passin and Dundra Sele is the Trangat Matavada, Masin and Dundangato series of Trangat Matavada, Nato Zatang, Tobo Tomosin and Dundra Sele, Trangan Dundra Senior Horizon, the Trangat Matava, the Nato Lute, Rino, the Nekana Sora, Harusan and Jiktin Tutan, Naktasan, the Jamso Chimbo, Lemtrosan, the Sunday Julian de Son, Rotanekana Son, Hangasoka, Lulang Sik, Hata Robot, that say Sayali, Karsi, you, Nanjiktin Camden. Which roan Choran Zambal and Sagan de Chewa, Matsiva Tandriki Oris. na cha zai sa ya le ru na cha ri hian ro de cha na chu si po song de sa ya na tai gyam zo le ja che wa king nga zo le yo ri lem tro te na ye ge ge le ta ma ge le ka nan di ma ge le nga zo ge sa nyo ri te tru ya ge ta jem cha kha ju na nga zo ge pha ma pe ji se na ta nga zo ge za chang zho bo zho mo si nyo ri te de te lo bo le de song ro mai thom ta ja hyu che ge cham re ver de jang sai long mun jo 대긴 파마마제 직장미 송네 야효그 측을 다다 효바게 측을 충청들어 던드 마이 톰타 야효 측을 좀 던다고 다단 잠벌에 사데 차장 러버 디갈레라 나서 파마세바데 장만 거들이 다데 산제 근원히게 송야로 나서 보다를 이체 거로 코렉 승원히게 송야레 마이 톰타 야효 측을 좀 러버들 사이롱 먼저 다롱딘 잠벌에 사간데 단사 토코 마리스 대비 파마마제 직장미 송아서 파마 베지 던드 세뇨레 데니 땅아서 그 제와르 다니 차당 덩아르 다린 덩아르 니리 덩아 조보른 덩아 조모른 덩아 husband 덩아 wife 덩아 boyfriend 덩아 girlfriend 랍고나 람야 메리다 제와 요거 정말 제와 요거다 대지과리다 대인도 그 차당 그 돈이 걸와도 동화를 용코링아서 걸와 동화를 용지 자와도 힘차리도록 힘차 힘바다 켜바 힘차니 돼. 다 대파 방걸리리 저. 제와다 아바걸리리 저. 가서 hin지 유베 제와다 야바. 제와다 야바 찬양을 자 요탐나 가서 그 창마 파마 연바다 어디 힌도 파마 버지다 자니 파마세마뇨 서제메와 저하드 고온데 히랍 저하 고온데 제와다 찬양을 램 그도. 근데 동화들랑 얘기 향로 근도. 근데 대와 유련데 바기 见근도. 든르게 그 제와들 레고 링아서 대인 거로 동할 때 잘고 링아서 잘고야 그 짐지 든르게는 당 거가서 그 동할 삼제 마차바 용저든 거로 동할 때다 대리 대인달이 진짜 당 거로 동할 때 랑아서 잡 동할 침보 위야라서 바다 오리 제가 남제가 동할 당보 제버 동할 대니 나버 동할 대니 개버 동할 게 대니 쳬버 동할 제가 남체 동할 초 침보 위야데 다 산제게 zeg데네 산제가 콜리저로 저세 동고야가 자완다고 토마르 찌 텔런테로 막게 동할 침보 위야데 자버 동할 침보 위야데 가서가 두 나면 가서 강고 토고 말이 자와 니네 강고 토고만 잠벌랭게 사이언스 코로로 외데네 ndala kaja 데나 kaja 까 토고 말이 가서 제가 남체 동할 침보 위야데 로본 초랍서 야가 가서 드루wen 랩치wen 데니 로침보체 데니 로침보체 데니 제 잠니 제 드루wen 말렘 치비 디올 디 바로니 가서 타르카 말이라지 데인데 다디 동할 때는 가서 잘타고 걸리 디 동할에 잘고는 개와도 거와 다너 서제는 타르토고 툭산라고 대통 걸리 당가서 제버 동할 나버 동할 제버 동할 대하나이게 개버 동할 당가서라 망체교대 당 개버 동할 때 혁침보 자거리 데니 추 드바 보이는 개버 동할 때 매와 찬더리다 개버 동할 자만이네 매와 찬더 거리 장보기는 나야 암년다는 개버 동할 줄 자만이네 오마 코나다 동할래 또 하레바리도서 추 드브데 다 오네리 게나 개제 옴당 제야야 르바 제 당당 선바 제 쪼쪼 저 다다가 저 덤타 지만은 현저도 제나 나와 제 당당 대요리 원천리 리 야라제 저랑 냥 세계마다 제나 나와 제 당당 강강 오마레 대다 대하 고사자다 건가 대대는 가서 그 대바 쟁게도 거는 뭐 인도 만자바를 리다산 가서 대 다다가 조사니 다와 지만은 해야 되는 공존지 다들 자 강자 거판 다리 용도로 당아 혀린다래 된 든주 오마레 건 대레 조사래 당아서 그미 든주 다다가 미 공진 든주 미 첨보 처래라 연건도 스미테 스나 대서 체생가다시 처라나 미테 제야 가서 그 녀야 람나 고거 말에 가서 미 고마레 nga zawala soran de 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 nga tsereng de lama garden ri nga hyaga mari hini o mari hinji chuja nga ga mari ko nga yong mo ko la ko nga ga mari la kare de de chor jon tham kare ko nga hi ta nga ko nga gang lo mari si ko nga thi lo mari nga mai thi lo mari si de tru de chor jon tham kare de dong de ko ha jo jan ta tru ri ta ma ge ba dong har char zo tru char go nga so ge do de ta kar po re ji 때 생년마 레서 쩨데 당아 게다 데 짜간도 때 메와 차로 거 덴두 차고 때 제가 남제 동할 Tela tinge dralan trepa drala trepa dongar nila tarva dongar mandupa thoda papa dongar ndopa thoda makarva dongar ta tengra ka dongar chimbo mambo ringa sola ta drala tarva treja dopa nila trepa tarja dopa mandupa thoda papa dongar ndopa thoda makarva dongar ta tenga so yu yambare ta ta tan jikti khamdane da nga so Tata te sarbo ha ko thogando chik samno tangyana tata chereng da so yarjen ron zambalen di movin ramen ra da longin ramen ra da so ge sanjon ramen ra di nang de phatan da de ta ta so ngone ta ne kon khor chini di tata nga so kon khorwa ge thiki ba nang ye nga so ge movi te ni chor ha ko thogando pha hin ta da o ngone ta ne ge donghan dan do pombo tham je kan ra do khol ta 다다 동하르 현대게 용 되어리 在刚在家这讲这个啊这嘛这的告诉다等住第早年的没往가서抢着搞的코르 동하르 세야데 삼사라 세 코르 동하르 잠소 세야데 타민 코르 동하르 잠소 세야데 타메 완다오 다等住个동하르 존에 다디 동하르 된 체니 등 가서 하고 거를 빵거 디 혁자 더바 코나게 코 자시 tarwa yende jo nga so kan khang ba to som bain khang ba da wo ri chim tarwa yende yok de ne den da li jin je khong ge ta jam da bo we go ne jam de mang bo yo ri jar dang khong ne jar bo la zum mo mang bo ri de ta se da jin ze ge ma yang da we go na hla lin zi ba ye yo ri to so yin ju jon ro so cha ri den de ta de ko ri sam sa ra den da pam yor la ka chi o li se la ka chi o li ngue la ka chi o li jar bo zo de 그래서 참아 닝보면도 공네 되네 공에 강바 협지 말아대 손에 동방을 벌도 상계에서 와라 된루베도 가서 그 도서제는 코로나 조제데 된루베는 在 셈토네 방제 희나 코로나를 배뷰 희그리 현자의 파 저 현자의 파라서는 코로나 나나 요정 코로나가 마우바 때 여기 보면 단지 파때는 코로나는 오리다 남자 보면 샤사 다당하 닝마를 하 상하 냠니 세는 도 소라 부지 요리 세세모 요리 나마 요리 쟁미틀 니 요리 니미틀 삼 요리 예레 나레 요리 야레 신추 요리
De sedan semo songina cham song.
짬 말와도 진짜는 때친다는 납견한데 지속자한데 저리
맞죠.
리 Then 이제 자꾸 옆에 계자리 다당 가르친 롬보죠 거만 틀에 영점도 접탑 송도 참 자꾸를 계자 해죠. 얘나 더서 현차 요 말에 그 얘나 대일 탈부 상원 요리 거는 거래. 코로나가 하고 할 때. then 이제 더서 코로나 담 종지 담나 요전 코로나 종지 먹어봤다고 대리. 다 대리 쳐 현차 요 말에 현바 요 말에. 얘나야 현바 매버도라나 코뭐 독자리 코고 조모 자이티 요 조모 니티 요요 코뭐 레짐데 메완다오리스네 데마리 든르기 레짐데 메와베네 요코마 코고 디 포모 서인자 조보 체우는다 조모 체우는데 유든 타르 상원 야야데 디 셈주든 게브 상원을 야데네 디너 서제네 레가 데서 탑 세야데 데리 탑 히럽 세야데 든르기 토니 로호를 된 더서는 코로나나 요리든 코로 종지 마고 바리 코로 종지 마고도 현차요 말이야 나서 직딩 코로나들 현바 요리 저거 배 현차 효침보지 제와다 현차니 카카리 효 제와 세야데 미 현차 세야데 효침보르기 지 현차데 제와 임부 접다리 삼노 땅코데 다데 하니 정가도 저 love you 정가도 저 하비 더서 다데 제와 임부 깨자리 대나 제와 말이 돼 현바리 년체 격하리 나데 저 자즈 송거려 자리 차래 하님 로 차리 다오 말이 대대 다 제와 가리 저 돈 담배 제와로나 격하리나 저 제와데 오리야 하니리 따바 하니리 대대 든르게 돈이 가서 그 삼노 땅거리 히랍 남주게 걸어서 동할때 친이 간르리다 든르리나 든르게 삼노 동거다 저런 걸은 친이라 삼노 땅나 다 대야랑
hope everybody's ears survive that. Sorry. I suppose for many of you listening, this topic, the problem of samsara, which is basically an exploration of suffering, must be pretty boring. For one thing, we talk about this frequently. So you may be thinking, suffering, 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 suffering. Why do I always have to hear about suffering? So if any of you listening are so fond of samsara that you don't want to hear about what's wrong with it, I apologize, because I am going to talk about what's wrong with it. To start with, we have sufficient intelligence, each of us, to understand our suffering. We're capable of doing what the Buddha taught us to do when he said, understand suffering. And by doing that, by understanding our suffering, we really can transcend it. The problem of samsara, as I mentioned, is that it's an endless cycle, potentially endless. We can think of it as spinning, looping, circling, but it's limited in the sense that, like a bee in a jar, we go up, we go down, we go around, but we don't seem to be able to get out. And it is beginningless, literally beginningless, which means, if you think about it, that we have been everything to each and every being, and each and every being has been everything to us countless times. The number of times that any single given being has been our father, our mother, our friend, our enemy, someone we didn't care about, is endless. As Rudra said in his confession, if the flesh and bones of all my bodies were piled up, they would be larger than the greatest mountain. If all my blood and pus from all those lives, why does everybody have to talk about pus all the time in these things? Anyway, if all my blood and pus from all those lives were gathered, it would be larger than the vastest ocean. And my karmic propensities are so inconceivable in number and extent, Arya Nagarjuna once wrote, the number of times any given being has been your mother is far greater than the number of pieces of earth you would get if you broke up a vast country into clods of earth the size of juniper berries. The point is that whatever analogy we can come up with, the number of times any being has been your mother is going to be greater than that. Unfortunately, our problem is that we fixate on current relations, current status, current identifications, which we project. We think, this person is my father, only them. This person is my mother. This person is my boyfriend. This person is my girlfriend. It's kind of silly if you think about it, because that person has been all those things countless times, but so has everybody else. If you love because of that type of identification, then you should love everyone equally, because they've all been your father, they've all been your mother, they've all been your girlfriend, they've all been your boyfriend. It's interesting that when we fixate on current position, current state in this life, we call it love, but it's actually the opposite, because it's an attachment that is caused by the labeling or designation of another person in a fixed role. Attachment is the fundamental cause of our samsaric suffering. It's attachment that keeps us, as they say, coming back for more. And attachment is not love. It's the opposite of love. Attachment is aggressive and it's selfish. Love is wanting someone to be happy. Attachment is wanting to imprison them, hold them in a certain position, which you can't do. It's wanting to stop time, which you really can't do. There are 4 things that we cannot avoid experiencing. And generally, we experience them as great suffering. Birth, aging, sickness, and death. Everybody experiences these 4 things. And in fact, it was the Buddha's observation of these that was his inspiration to renounce the splendor of what would have been his kingdom, renounce his throne, and walk away from all of it on bare feet. We can't prevent the experiences of birth, aging, sickness, and death. But what we seek is freedom from the suffering that they bring. And this is attainable. Best example I can think of for this is my grandfather, Karma Thupten. He's quite old and has serious illnesses, but he doesn't suffer. He doesn't experience aging as suffering. He just gets sharper and sharper and more happy and relaxed. He doesn't experience sickness as suffering. He experiences aging and sickness as a joke. You know, when a doctor examined him and said, "Sir, half your heart is necrotized. You only have half a working heart." He thought that was hilarious. Didn't affect his life. When a doctor last year said, "Sir, you're going to be dead in a month," he thought, what a joke. He said, "Don't worry about me. I don't need your medicine. So I'll just pray to my root guru." And he said, "Anyway, you know, Yama, the Lord of Death, he doesn't like me very much. So he doesn't want me down there." Compare someone like that, who is truly fearless and therefore free from suffering, to most of us. We are so afraid of aging in particular. We look in the mirror and every new wrinkle, every additional white hair is a source of traumatic pain for us. We experience it as suffering because of our attachment. And everything else that makes us suffer because of our attachment. Separation from friends, having to spend time around enemies, loss, all the things that cause us to suffer because of our attachment. Actually, movies are an excellent source of instruction in the workings of samsara and suffering. Because all dramas, the very concept of drama, is a portrait of samsara. Every drama, what makes it dramatic is samsara. The difference is that samsara is endless. It was seeing this that inspired Buddha Shakyamuni to relinquish his royal throne. And make no mistake, at that time, his kingdom, centered on Kapilavastu, was quite splendid. He was not leaving some kind of two-bit home. He had a magnificent palace, loads of wives, particularly the mother of his son Rahula is said to have been as more beautiful than a goddess. Lots of wealth. I mean, absolute monarchies in those days, the monarch had everything. But he walked away from all of that on bare feet. Well, how do we emulate the Buddha? We must emulate the Buddha by, while we are in samsara, not being of samsara. Most Nyingma tantrikas are married and have kids, children. In fact, some of them are what I would call super married, where they have multiple companions. For example, Terchen Bawa Dorje had 50 consorts, around 50, more than 50. But this is not the kind of emotional drama of acceptance and rejection that we may think. There's no attachment, there's no drama, there's no rejection, fluctuation, or any of that. Now, such people are definitely in samsara, but they are unstained by it because they are free of attachment. In contrast to that, our problem this is going to be fun. I hope I can do it as funnily as he did. In contrast to that, our problem is that we mistake attachment for love. We think we're being loving when we say, "Oh, honey, I love you so much," which is fishing for honey to say the same thing back. "Honey, I love you so much." That's not love. That's fishing. That's attachment. We use the word love dishonestly. We are not voicing our love. We are voicing our demands, our attachment. Oh, I thought it was funny anyway.
Shotaro?
Shota.
Oh, that's oh, Terry. That in the that is a never gare re song de na that on that. never know a parla tonda you are separate the some garbage in an Norverakari the never know a parla hirap there's a logi ra separate teri ta Jeran Corvin Sinila ta ten dawari ta mambon korwa chaksar hi dina jimsi mewan dawarin Corvin Sini tanga so tamage hi yamba dawari so donang si mizi dawari mato jeke Teni hi jambari ta ten the take jebati nana tracking trapa when song yasa mambo yori ta kamzala mekalon te take jeba zogo sar hondo lodona ye take jeba sort way gani o dubate na yeri Teni sevra redo so donghala sam yana ta nga so nyarwa donghala chek sa yana ten ta nyarwa la chamnyarji ta tramnyarji ta nyetse nyankor ta tendro mambo yori Teni te ramji nyarwa donghal de ta nga so nyarwa le che go ke yori nyarwa le che mogoli phachara ta je chugewa la bo chi sa bo drop so na ma to je ka le khawori ko Lata Lama in Tamjia Tarto Lag Tamjia Tarto Potong Donghar on the Nyari Yolango Tarlaton Longari. Then the Tanyar Donghar say de Yasuni Tingna Dunjom Mumbu Chimbota Tsawa Rab the Tsawa Deana Yegata Remji Tata some Tangana Lord Jangana Tata so T Japan and the Tesa Samotana Ha Kokari. Yasu Seriade Tanyara Sarkin Renyar Soma Tanyar Son Tamjik Sarkin Recand Natamsakali Chandro the Kajak Tenila Su Seriag Dra Tubatamji Yasun do Yang Yobar no the Machian tenderly Hitting Taco Fly Lodang Tao Lord Trapta Jibja part Lord Trapta Jibjas on the Tata Tarbachi Mondotina Sondo Nyonko Lerite Nyara Tata Samyarji the Tramyarji La Sobate Narmi Nyarata Narmi Nyarala Zone Mevari Tend Yasun Tingna Tena Yanyar Son Yaro Soma Tamjek Yang Tingna La Take Nyar Soma Tamjek Choranga Zobotela Take Nabore Jan the Take the thought and the top zone la Sule long the Sule take a dumper jatan tong tram bum tumber young tele janico yasun the young tailor jan the tundruvet ko ta hitting Yamarella Trankan diri zone Zawanini ko drang matapa that tundruka donharnion deor in also Nyaro that did donharte hin donhartan living Taylor takes an angra chin chudogorwa then Taylor some takes a tongolemato nga Taylor some tongimando tonkame and an a chudogosan ko ngaso Pugatambe yori Kupta magosan Pachakamari lakari Cấp cha mà có sản bớt cái mà đi là cái
Cúp cha xin
cái mấy số bớt cái có na mình mà bớt dùng sa cha có rồi cha thế sao nazok cái mà đó thế mình bớt dùng thâu cái mà rồi bớt cái na nazok go cái thế thì ta ta na ta khâu to khá pin rồi coi thế vậy na nazok rồi thế tam bể ta被张波嘛，被人把嘛的嘛头呢，东张波嘛的，如果没上是吧？对，他cấp差嘛个啥呢？不结果呢，搞来考的。对，东海的时候，但是当里面呢，什么嘛到呢？给我要跑的找过呢，我呢去年的点吧，给我人找过呢，找个嘛的。对，把你看了咋，了个嘛的，就那个说当备要的，样当备接了。把你看了咋了个嘛的在呢？看我是你都个看当你的呢，瞧人看那了，看了啥个嘛的，瞧人看了咋能绕过的一种呢？他等着去当别要的，这样呢一个东海地了，这这什么当过的，等着亚述听那dunjom zo na ta tra pa la la zan ro ko le ko te ya sa nga zo ko phong ge na ma ri tra ri ka wu jo ro cho la sa tra ri pa la la nya ro sim ji drang zi do ma ta le tan ra za cha or ga ri pa la de cha pe ni ri char jo ani ri char jo ra ni pa la ri zan ro de ta ne na tham hya ka ri yang ra pa jo ro de yang de ne ya su ko de ten de cha ja na ma lo tong cha ma bo la ja chin re ge lo dang ta wo ta nya wa la sha re ta sha ju re zhen zi zhou yao re de so zhang ga gong zhang la me xiao long de yao de de nyong ne ta du go le ya su ting na den ju ta ngom bu qian bo ta den zhe ge dong ha nyong na u zo ne nga cha ra zhen Tata ngumbu nga so ke teacha murre ngumbu dongdile ke chekamari. Rap har chor sapso tongwa thamje ke go tu go le tendre ke ngumbu. Tele chani janjal le ngumbu chembo. Ta tenda le chenje chawa rap to chawa me tendre ke gambarna ta tendre ke re yanda tenyarwa chamnyar ji ta tramnyar ji ta tenda le chenje nyeche ta nyankor ta ko orwa nyankor na ba chobji la so ba zone Himalaya dombo teana ye ke o radolom thang kangba ser zina kangba zasa chachang radol so jangjang ri do ra tendre jangjang la gomba pon ro ta hen Himalaya dombo zone zelen jin zek zek ba kap so hen yang so so tropo tromo hin cha ha jang qianbo ji tendre ke kable tri ne xia song wa jie wa lang so so to so tendre le jie wa lin ko le 다다 조보 조모 발라랑아서 소주 요거도 던들을 제와 린도 거들 하장 너차 쳐봐 치네 거 던들이 선사 따땡아서 푸사다 따때서 삼노 떼사마도 데니 캬말레 동보라 현차창근 제마리딜 동보 로마 der yarga branch tam je re yong de lula ja de lu tam ba tong cha be tam de te ten de yan zain de zhou bo zhou mo tam je ge zhe ne bu ne ne hu ngan de ne yu zo gi tong de da jing ya dang we de zhe le zhe ju kan ne yu sa kha ta re ni re ge yang mek tam je cha tham ban ro ge kyo na zhen ba tam je lin ro ge sa kha ta tam je ge ten da yang zhou mo da zhou bo de so ge me tan yong me ne nga ne yu zo de ga gi tu ne re ni bo yang ma che ten da dong har nyang ne ten da kar ba tong cha mang bo de nyong go le re rom nya kan dam zo ne ten da le jin je ro jiang jiang ge ko dam ri san na na re sen do de da de la chao ba qian bo ge be tang ga bo ji bo da san ne ren ro de rom nya kan dam ka ne nya ro yo la tang ga bo ji bo garden ya bo ga wa yu yo ma de nya ro yo la da yang de ne meng cho de din na song ro de cha zang ro wa da ten de jiang jiang kan dam na na so ne dong har kar ba chang me ba ke ten de ke nyong ten da de jin je da the Samyarji, Tramyarji, they are Nangeri, Pematar Geba, Pematar Chair Geba, Achu Chover Dorala, Sobata, so regent, take some no Tangana, Lobote, Tatang also go going to Tramwale, Janjor, Tonjor, Tramwa regent, the Lobo Shamarpot and Dong Hombo, they recant or the Pematar Geba, they recant or the Pematar Chair Geba, Tamba with Sarbarin, Yang Sorsu. That Tundru when the Dongharte, Nima Jema Nima. 치주 깔마마 데 달컴 요 말이 양 다다 저랑 그냥 동안 요 다다 저랑 카피 파티 리저는 요 말이 따테 유 ngô 주세 ngô vinda ta nyar dong har de tang me ba tin ri nyong ko ro nyar ba de ri ta nyar dong har je na ta dor du ba yi na ta nyar dong har la tin ri nyong ko
niekor jid shamale dongbo tang chik ronya ke dam radre loma dene ang chik do nume de chuo chik tsashing tsawa deyang chik do
mema marjo
mema bojo
te ngare mema marjo ta te ji nye yo ro ji ro mema marjo ten ro me
dene de sanyal dangbo de ge de yongse ge zhe de jachen rikshi de ngazo milo jachen rikshi gi nyemo chik de ngazo milo chongtra ngachure
ta de ro
dene degi de so ke ore de ore
ta ore
and then so Lama said, I know I'm kind of babbling disconnectedly, but sometimes amidst my babble there might be something that would be helpful to you. As they say, sometimes you can find jewels in the garbage. So we've been talking about the character of samsara, and I don't think I need to go into further detail about it in general. If you want to study it in more detail, I encourage you to read The Words of My Perfect Teacher, which is pretty much the most extensive explanation. It contains the most extensive explanation of these. Another aspect of the problem of samsara is the sufferings which are particular to each of the 6 states of being. To go from the bottom up, the worst state in samsara is what we call hell or naraka. And generally, it is said that there are 8 hot hells, 8 cold hells, and 2 other categories of hells. The first are called adjacent, and the second are called individual. The 8 hot hells are 8 levels of hellish existence that contain horrific suffering from heat, mutilation, and violent death that are continuous. The least severe of them is called the hell of reviving. And this is a hell where, aside from the terrible heat which burns you, you are also violently killed, often through impalement. And as soon as you die, you come back to life, and it happens again. And in some cases, the hell beings kill one another. In some cases, they are tortured to death by the hell guardians. But this happens countless times in each day. Now, the lifespan of this hell is extremely long. 50,000 human years constitute one day in the lowest of the god realms, the realm of the 4 great kings. 50,000 of their years constitute one day in the life of a being in the reviving hell. The hell below that, the hot hell below that or beneath that, is called black line. And in this hell, you are imprisoned and bound by the hell guardians who snap like chalk lines on your body and then saw through them, cutting you into thousands of pieces. You immediately come back to life, and they do it again. And this, of course, happens continuously. At this point, Lama interrupted his own presentation of this lovely topic to say, it's painful to consider these things, but it's important. As I said earlier, you can't get anywhere you want to go without considering what you want to avoid. And we certainly want to avoid a rebirth in hell. And then, in a sense, we are trying to actually give birth to a new understanding. And we have a saying, no birth, no childbirth is ever really painless for the mother. And I mean, the Tibetan is a little bit earthier than that, but let's leave it at that. Now, each of these hell realms, these hot hells, is much, much hotter. I think they say 20 times hotter than the one above it. And also the lifespan is proportionately greater, longer, as you can read in the words of my perfect teacher. For example, the lifespan in the second hot hell, black line, 100,000 human years constitute one day in the life of a deva of the realm called 33, because there are 33 principal devas there. Indra and his court. 100,000 of their years are one day in black line. And it increases proportionally until when you get down to very hot, which is the seventh, the duration is half of a long kalpa, so the duration of a universe. And when you get to the lowest, avicii, or uninterrupted torment, the duration of a lifespan in that hell is an entire universe, an entire kalpa. The continuing downward, the next hell is called crushing. And crushing is the principal suffering, the suffering from which, for which it's named, is that the beings are trapped between two moving mountains that come together and crush them to pulp. Then the mountains separate. The beings are reconstituted. Then it happens again, endlessly. This is often said to be the karmic result of, like, when you know, if you swat one insect, that'll do it. That'll get you there. Seriously. You know, every intentional action has four results. Yeah. Like, like in Tibet, he says when we would get lice, we would just crush them on our nails, between our nails. And he said that was known to be a prominent cause for rebirth in the crushing hell. Moving on, then there's wailing and terrible wailing. It's not that the wailing that's not called terrible isn't terrible, it is, but there's worse and then even worse. And the sound which comes from the torture, it's, again, in those two hells, I think wailing, it's mostly one-pronged impalement, and in great wailing, it's three-pronged impalement, is beyond anything we could experience in this world. They say that if you were cut to pieces as a human being by 100 executioners with swords or other blades, while still being alive, the suffering of that would not equal the least of the sufferings in the hell realms. Then the last three are hot, very hot, and uninterrupted torment. In hot, you're constantly boiled in molten copper or molten metal, and in very hot, it's even worse. And in uninterrupted torment, you're in the midst of a kind of what they describe as like an iron box with flames shooting at you from every direction, so that your body and the fire become inseparable. But you still feel it terribly. Now, the other thing to keep in mind about these hell realms is that the flesh or nervous sensitivity of a hell being's body is thousands of times more sensitive than ours. So it's not that they experience these pains less than we would. They experience them more. That's what they say. Now, when a being's karmic lifespan in that particular hot hell ends, after billions of years, they're able to escape it. But then they go to something that's almost as bad. And these are what are called the adjacent hells. There are said to be sets of all four of these adjacent hells in all four directions of each of the 8 hot hells. So There are 16 adjacent hells surrounding each of the 8. In no particular order, the first one, about which Lama went into the most detail, is the Shalmali tree, and sometimes called the Shalmali mountain. You find yourself, when you get there, you find yourself looking up. Sometimes they say it's a hill, and sometimes covered by trees. Sometimes they say it's just one tree. But anyway, you find yourself looking upward at the principal object of your sexual desire in your most recent human life. And he or she says to you, I'm up here, come up here, come up here. As you climb the tree or climb the mountainside, all the leaves and branches are facing downward, and they're all razor sharp and covered with thorns. So that by the time that you reach the object of your desire, your body has been literally torn to bloody shreds. When you reach the top of the tree or the top of the mountain, the object of your desire turns into a predatory bird. Sometimes they say a crow, sometimes they say an eagle. In any case, it's a raptor of some kind that, I guess crows aren't raptors, but anyway, whatever it is, it pecks out your eyes and possibly your heart in some descriptions. Then you return to your former state and you look downhill or toward the bottom of the tree, and you see again the object of your desire down there. It says, I'm down here, I'm down here, come down. I mean, I shouldn't laugh. And so you climb down. But this time all the branches and all the razor leaves and everything else are facing up. So again, you get torn to shreds. And when you get down there, he or she turns into the bird or raptor and pecks out your eyes and your heart and probably lots of other stuff too. And that goes on and on and on until, that karma is worn off. The second of the adjacent hells is the thicket of swords. And the thicket of swords, you're trying to escape from hell. You've managed to get out because of karmic changes, get out of the hot hell. So you're trying to walk farther and farther away. And as you walk farther away, you find yourself walking through a forest or jungle or thicket of swords. And they just cut you to pieces. You keep on going, and you again get cut to pieces, and so on. Then eventually you get to a pit, like a surrounding pit that surrounds the hell perimeter, and it's filled with fire and burns you. And then there's a swamp that you have to cross. It's called the Swamp of Rotting Corpses, but it's actually much worse than that. Because not only is this a swamp of rotting corpses, but the water is basically acid. And as you plunge a limb into it, all of the flesh is burned away. So that when you raise your leg, your foot, the bone is as white as though picked clean. And then you have to step again with the other and so on. And it's up to your waist. So it's not just your feet that are getting burned. And also, along with that, of course, there are rotting corpses in there, but there are also predatory fish-like creatures like piranhas that also, if whatever the acid doesn't get, the predators do. So those are where you go whenever your life in any of the hot hells ends after billions and billions of years. The cold hells are 8 in number. They have names like cold, very cold, sneezing crazily, splitting open like a lotus, splitting open like a great lotus, and so on. And in these hells, you suffer from terrible cold that causes your hell body, which is we've seen is very sensitive, to burst open, causing your exposed inner flesh to turn blue, and then it's reconstituted and it happens again and again. And the thing about all of these hells is that until the karma that caused your rebirth in that hell has been used up by the experience of suffering, you can't die. You want to die, you may seem to die again and again, but you always come back. And it just goes on and on and on.
Ola so tateri. Tateke nyarkan chobji ndordu chupan rawo re. Te jepa be gona ta te jepa nana zainanda te ha kori. Te ta tile dosa nyarwa dorje din zor de tene nga so che kamari chero se kamari. Nga so chi ni yo mari kare sina sangha dorje tekbala dorje chepo tamji la tamse chanyam hyok chembori so na ta ko make some dub se la communicate ke mane dorje din longari. Yan dikki ha leba ki tandro na dorje din ma longari te ma to je yinda thamji ta dorje din se ya tene nga so che kamari. Te la semtra go mari. O teri teni te ta ta nyarwa te ramba be nyon ramba be nyon ramba be nyon che thar chen thar che ramba nyon go nyar yor che char du ma to che la che de che thar song sa ta che so la Lama drwa khok chen bo je so la given driver tam phin zo given driver ro na a khi kamari ma to che man che yu de te nyarwa de karsi nyar yor song na he dang ge jin jin nyar yor song na nyar yor de dong har de nyon go le de ta nga zo ge kha zang ga Zoking Tiaga Capsula, Ruki Yaori, Tabarkin the Colle, Tak take Capsula Nyawara Dog Donga the Tenda or Jangola, the Janyu, Nyam Yasi you, Janyu, Nyam Yasi you, si Gomdena, Pe Gomni Yaki, Hokimbon the Holiday, things in a Zoba Kimbo Yaki, Hokimbon the Holiday, since you rectally Kimogolic and Corrican but the Tene, don't recall it. That thing I saw the Padoro Gol, the Miro Gol, the Kimba, the don't recall it, Gale. Tokin Zoki Gomdia Pala, the Zoki Gondomun, Yamnisin, the Mandina, the Mambo, or then the Tenu, he jangori. Lotaba, Tanga, Gada Chuk. Chazang top Sara Ruki Jam Mogosaria Yomari. Ruki Lama Archinda and the Ruki Tatsumchi Yipjavan, the Laman and the Yang Yongs on the Songjol, the Tatsumchi so young Arche. Then I change the Congo Loma Tamjika Ruki Nisha young out the Sumcho in the Lotaba Yandi Kilamako Ruki Jana. Then I change the Janko, the Yanda Tarto Nazo Tozari Tojo or Kunzang zone, te Hamao Pardo, te so takes a young to Jin as all a pinto chimboy or a terry. Teni T Gini Ta Nison some go one outside the Rabanibate, Yadari. The Yadala young tender change a cable check or check Kiesona, or Machile Takigorim as a check Kiesona. Then you say Drapachi, the Naga Drapachi, the Gunkarja Drapachi, the Kala Java Yadata, Zenga Neba Yadata, the Yadala Kaja, the Zine Yadamamboy. Nazola, that say Drapachi in that zone, the say Drapachi, Tayadaya, the Zeketa, Tape Chaga, the Mego, Pata, the Pene Garden Pe, Jibo Nawa Jibo, Medo Hardili, Zachidili, Shenkidili, Pe Jiboda, some near Nawa Harand. Yadaga yola chula garden yabora kawayu. Ta cheng ro then tramba, tomba, cho me ba sab so yi to mon wa ta tin ri ke sa cha la le
ngā
de
tō
le
bārdō lā nē pē kāwsi yedāk tē chē wā lōng nā, dāmbō tē pē gātsā chēmbō rā wā tōng kā rā wā.
thông qua
Tē
rồi
sōng wā.
đó thế thì thì giờ đã giờ là chia sẻ được từng cái cái thông qua sao đó cũng so từng cái thế cả vài yêu mà đi xong rồi giờ đã giờ là thế sao chỉ bảo được từng cái thế nên có tiền ra đi chơi thế đấy thế nên nàng cái chấp chơi tiền ra đi chơi anh cái cho lót ra tung ra mà bộ cho ra có mà con có rồi giờ đã chỉ con cái đồng hàng rồi chỉ cần con bất đồng hàng rồi ta giờ đã là đồng hàng chơi cái đấy là ngã số cái pha đó đó giờ sao mà pha đồng xe với cái này giờ đã chỉ con cái đồng hàng chỉ cần con bất đồng hàng thì nhau có rồi 다 고양 나가 잡아지서 다 몰로 톰차네 쵸자데 쵸마니나 다 가시 라마타와가 나블룬다와다 세자 라만다와다 때서 다 텐라지 산초 섬바 섬마 때사레 산초가 셈딘데 탐지 여다라 mikpa 세드네 다 가서가 파마 장장로 왔더니 제와랑데데 가서 파마 장장리 닝싱도 장장리 자창 조보 조모 장장리 더서라 맥데는 삼노 땅데 닝기 산디게 닝기 규모 많이 버토니正好等呢，我做个我过的，我做的多那我的那卡里金脚把。恰张老爸这的老爸这个出生个那的恰张的我比蛮年多，得说也大了我哟啥呢？这个人呢，得说出他当我们我投过的，金巴东有，但那个玩接当过几个好的，他们呢，现在是一个中忙着，中忙的北面红，做的呢一个中忙着呢，得说的特别好，啥呢？我比个人呢，但你金巴脚把的呀，出他没当啊，抢着过的。等住这个在来的，俺家里那平头个，等家里那吃平头，等住这个我的打出家呢，也打忙不出家呢，等你什么他们就人渣呢，什么跟得着把他们的什么个角落的碰着了，那等住个东汉娘搞的，假使你把当啊咱的没把那的谁中这个嘛你把那的这俺嘛从这通呢，多有中上。ទីណាមេបានតកលតនេលំណកផាឆេងតកលខាសាទីណាយេណាកដបាជិនទេរទេរលីគុងករជដបាជទេអរេតាទេលងខាលជវតាဇင်លនេបាតាតងអាសុងខាលជវយដាតាតាសាតាកោតាទេកោយដាទីរីដលសាកោអゾនេណាំខាថំបូកានសាមផរកោទេសាဂុរេទេកោរងករបានថងទុទេរបារីទេនសានកោបតោរដលរងទេសេរងបោឌូកោលេខោណាថានបាមដរបាទេលមែនថងកោកសាភូកោម៉ាតែរណាយេតានដរឌឺយ៉ាណាតាដងហរបាតមេបាតកុំកទីកុំបដងហរសំលេនដេបាសំជមឆាបាហ៊ីមថបតនរិកកយដាឡាដងហត្រងមេបាយោរកាស៊ីជេសូណាតាតនរិកឡាសំណតោនេមជេបថាភីលゾーនេជេសូអតេឡាសាជោកសែងកញិងជីងួមណាវីសូងួយ៉ាតាតាតេនរឆងួយ៉ាតាឆាប់តងួយ៉ាតាឈិមតាសេឡាមតាមជីងួវីតសូឡាតាតនរិកនេစီကောလေတတဲ့တန်တော်ဒီပန်တော့ဖာချူကြတာတတဲ့ဂျပန်နဲ့ထေဂျပန်နဲ့စမ်တော့တန်ကြတာဟာကောရောတတဲ့ဆိုလောတာတုံထားမှာပေါ်တဲ့ချေချေလတန်းလင်တဲ့ပါရီဟာတင်းတော့ချင်း
Then the last of the 18 categories of hell is called the individual or personal hell, and this happens when someone de nitse nyawa pena gendumpa cheke de go de tap and then go the go da wala chewala desore I mean the most it happens a lot to not only to but for example if you abuse the possessions of the sangha like you slam the door a lot then you would be reborn as a door that gets slammed constantly, and things like that. There are many examples of lamas liberating these, like something born inside a rock and all sorts of stuff. So that is a brief presentation of the 18 types of hell. There is one that's worse than any of them, and it's called Vajra hell. That one, Lama said, we don't have to worry about being born in as long as we don't violate samaya. As long as we keep good samaya with our teachers and our Vajra siblings, we won't be born there. The only people who are born there are those who break samaya or perform actions of heinous evil. Now, the cause of hell is basically anger, actions motivated by anger. And if you are born because of anger in a hell realm, unless you have an extraordinarily close connection with a great teacher who can liberate you from that, or have performed some other tremendous virtue, you are going to experience the full range of horrendous suffering that characterizes that specific realm. This is one of the reasons why we emphasize the practice of separation of samsara and nirvana in the practice of dzogchen. Because by combining acting out the realm and meditation, we can actually expunge from within us those karmic causes that would otherwise cause us to be born in hell. Furthermore, we should never think that the separation is something that you do before receiving the principal instructions in cutting through and leap over. Even after receiving those instructions, many great masters have continued to perform separation every year. For example, Khenpo Achu was known to have done it at least between 30 and 40 times. And many other masters do this as well. The way to tell if you don't need to perform separation anymore is, have you become Samantabhadra? If you have become Samantabhadra, then you don't need to do it again. But until you realize Samantabhadra face to face, it's a good idea to repeat separation because it's the most effective way to prevent, among other things, being born in hell. So that was an extremely brief summary of the hell realms. If you want to know more, please read The Words of My Perfect Teacher and other texts. The second, moving up, the second of the three lower realms is Preta, or Pretaka. And Pretas, we often call them hungry ghosts in English, but in their perception, they have bodies. You know, sometimes when we think of them as ghosts, we think, well, that must be cool because you can pass through stuff, but it's not like that for them at all. There are many, many species or types of pretas. Typically, we summarize them as four main categories. Those with external blockage, those with an internal blockage or impediment, those who fly, and those who inhabit the depths. Interestingly, I guess, when you are going to be born a preta, as you're about to take that birth, you're attracted to the realm. It looks like a beautiful field with lovely flowers and all sorts of nice things. But then once you are locked in, once you enter it, it turns out to be anything but. The preta realm, as they experience it, is devoid of anything nice, anything pleasant, especially anything to eat or drink. When we talk about the sufferings of pretas, typically we talk most about hunger and thirst because these are their primary sources of suffering. but they are by no means their only source of suffering. Their bodies are constantly in pain. Their joints are filled with flames. Their nails grow so long that they pierce through their palms and grow out the backs of their hands. They're so miserable that they're constantly aggressive to one another. They live for thousands of years, and they won't find anything to eat or drink, sometimes for thousands of years at a time. The occasional exception may be when a lama or monastic or good practitioner or a male or female bodhisattva dedicates either water or most commonly spittle, snot, whatever they produce in their body to them, then they can consume that. But the thing is that it has to be done right, or they'll end up fighting over it. It's been seen by our huts that sometimes when they find a little bit of the snot or spittle of a monk, there'll be a huge fight over it. So proper dedication with compassion is important. So we do this. We actually are encouraged to dedicate our piss, our excrement, the water that flows from when we wash our hands, what comes out when we blow our nose, all of that. We dedicate all of that to the pretas. And there are specific mantras you can use for this, but it is also sufficient simply to recite the Om Mani Padme Hum, with the sincere, compassionate wish that they be able to be nourished by this. So those pretas that suffer mostly from external impediments suffer from the absence of food and drink in their environment. Those with inner impediments suffer from the inability to consume anything, even if they find it. For example, their throats are so narrow that you couldn't pass a needle down through them. But their bellies are as large as an entire region of land. If they manage to get something down their throat, it won't fill their belly. But what it does do is it turns into fire and burns them. So they get no relief, no nourishment. Some pretas, those who fly, have limited sort of what we would call, not miraculous, but abilities, and they can be a source of mischief. And then many of them live in the subterranean depths. The suffering of pretas is truly unimaginable. So, keeping that in mind, we should do our best not to be born as one, not to accumulate the causes of preta birth, and feel as much compassion for pretas as we can, and do what we can for them, such as the practice of water torma and the dedication of urine, excrement, hand washing water, and so on, as I mentioned.
올라서 다 대리 당이 선섬네 선바테 대사레다 코섬나네 대사 자큐ンド다 던로리 던로라 징네 당 카토르존나 요리 다 텐라리 젠제 던로데라 동할 롱몽 꼬르규그 동할에서 가장 고니 히바나게 다 렌키 몽바다 꼬르힌 규브 동할 다 본라이나 simchi mambo la ta dabu zon da mazon wa simchi mambo yoro wa tanro te la te dabu mazon wa te tata rada da yongda zon rada yongsu zo ba de dabu mazon wa ra wo ri tan din da longba da na zum zolin na na chok no na che khalan da te ke yore ba kable yon da me kable khok chin bo ji ri ten da le chen ja da yongda zon ma ga da bo jab de li tenri te na ye gen thai jam so na na ta ko ka nya chim bo re ke na na nya chung chung mang bo tong cha chim cha mang bo chang je ne ta tenri we ne bek pa ta dong han yo re ten da le je nya chim bo re ke hyo ba hya la nya chung chung chim cha mang bo chang je ne nya chi ya de sa ya ta nya chung a ten da le je khana na chang je ne nya chi ya ke jab de re se yin de te sa ka yo re nga so da da 모비디 난 통통근도 아주 산제 공원 희기 희가 떠서 다다 가서 무슨 통도 아마 던져서 산제를 이치다 대박 혁친 뭐 지한도 다다의 체력 모비도 통통근도 등원에 산제 희가 나기 다 잠소 리나다 곡생 리나다 던져게 다 던져 장매 봐 다 장가 안 던져서 가서 다 장탑고 말이 다 산제 공원 희기 장탑고 나마도 장매 봐리 던져게 동할 빠다 매바 녀네 되어리 Teni mandali tondo deo na nga so poinda na ta mo dongar yo dongar ta tenda jinje simji mambo ya tanda dapo jab deo tela sagin chaza mo che kolin chorja yo mari ten te ge ni kapsal yang hya ko ri ta sa ko ri hya po to bu dongar zone ta ta so ngu so ko zba lobo la ya ge her de chazang ko tongka re ta de zu chazang ko ro ko le ko de kapsal chor ko de chepar jana ko hor ta chere tar son de scissors or de ge te sa ga ho ri chana mile ngan chu hen nan de chepar jana de ro gain ro ko te kapsa ko re chepar jana hen ri पर पार्ता ने तेने ठा थम जे मामा तो मोहो रे तंदु वेन दोंहा ते को रे ता मजो जे ते रे रांग रे मजो जे ते तंदु वेन यो बे दोंहा पोतो बे दोंहा ता ते मो तेंडा ले यो ने ता ओ मा यो मा ले को ले तेंडा पग थम जे ला ओ मा ट्रैक यो मा रे दोंहा सम जे मचाबा तंदु वे दे यो रे ता डॉग चंडा ओ तेंडा ने सला जिंग जाओ बा सा ने ते ला दो यो बा जा खल दे यो रे न दे लोंग बा ना तंदु ला जै साम खन दो ह्यो खेम बो हा जंग साम खन दो ते दंगा जो सा ला तंदु ला साम खिन यो रे ते ना या मांग के गु तंदु थम जे ते मग दा बो जा रे के छर जन दा वो मे रे तंदु तांग या यो रे ता तंदु ते ला दोंगा सम जे मचाबा ता मग दाबो जामने खंगबा ना चोक दिले ते सा वना या ते सा खालान टे ते सा गाख योरे दे मां के के तो सलो दे योरे ता तेंगसांग ने ता दी लोंबा रे ना हांटिंग टाइम दा चे जो दा ता 샤와 수리 तुसु 토네 멘다 की कोंदो ता मांबो सु यो कोले रे तो सा 차자 콘솔 니바 요 마리 수 고야게 콘솔 그뭐 파로보 수키 데라 도보 땅 요 마리 냠총 왜네 킹나세 데 요레데 다 수요 코레 데 코란서 동하리 응하젤레게 데데 돈롤 동하 던로 삼제 마자바 요레다 드수 존르다 다 텐다바 진제 히 ngaso ha ko thokari mang chekhuke te te ta ngi son samje donghar te na ne ta samba tonro ge donghar la tendru samje ma chapa yore ta ta so ha ko thaba se na te na tonro thamje la te sa samjong si thokar te nda le je jewa sama la so so tonro ge jewa lang song ne ya bo sa ma ri sam ne ge chara sancho samba sama wen de jewa ling go na sam yen de jewa ling je re te kha ri ma to je ge nga so ma chi yan de long chen mong pa la tin ne tonro ge jewa lang song ne ya ta ka le o sa ri sam ne tonro ge te ne zai yang tham na lo te ne ong phin o sam je ma
The third of the three lower realms is, we usually use the term animals, but since in modern usage animal includes human beings, it means those who are not upright, those who walk bent over. And basically humans and devas as bipeds stand upright, and most animals as quadrupeds or multipeds and whatnot don't, and that's where the name comes from. Anyway, the animal realm is the only one of the three lower states to which most of us have direct access, to which we can see. So we are somewhat aware of the sufferings that animals undergo, but not that aware. Animals include those that inhabit the water, whether salt or fresh, those that live on the earth, and those that live on the earth but also fly. And they include everything from the smallest bugs up to humpback whales and the giant squids in size. We often summarize their sufferings as the suffering of foolishness and of enslavement by humans, or abuse by humans. And those are certainly part of their suffering, but there is much, much more. Most species of animal, maybe all, have what we call natural predators. So one of the main causes of suffering for animals in any environment is predation. They are preyed upon by other animals, and they're often preyed upon by humans. Some animals are predators that prey upon other animals, but some animals are herbivores who really do very little damage. They tend not to kill, they tend not to ruin the environment, but they're at risk from their predators, which include us. Animals that are owned by people sometimes suffer in unique ways, because unless we keep them as pets, which is a very, very small minority among animals, we use them, we purchase them and abuse them for our own selfish purposes. We buy them to kill and eat, or we keep them to do our work for us, especially in times in human societies where there is very little technology. All the heavy lifting, it's looking green, all the heavy lifting, I don't see a problem with the battery. I think it's okay. Should I wait?
Something wrong with the internet?
Hi,
Right.
can you hear me? Hello,
Right.
can you hear me?
No. Oh. Oh yeah, they know how.
You could hear it.
Yeah, it's transmitting, it's not in the room.
Well, it,
No, I can hear it. It's it me.
all right. Yeah, so,
Yes, it's coming through.
in
Oh yeah. Now coming.
the very few of the animals that live in the ocean do not prey upon others, which means that in most cases, bigger fish eat lots and lots of smaller fish, which is a tragic thing both for the smaller fish in the short run and for the bigger fish in the long run, who requires killing lots and lots of of a fish for food. We can see what goes on in the oceans now. The Buddha spoke of it through his direct knowledge, but now we can see these things in documentaries. And we can actually observe how dangerous a place the ocean environment is for its inhabitants. The animals that we own are forced to do our work and not particularly well treated in most cases, to put it mildly. We butcher them. We, for food, we kill some animals for their skins, and we shear sheep, yaks, and others. Now, shearing is not something to be taken lightly. Lama said, nowadays we have scissors and other ways to shave these animals and rob them of their natural covering. But in the old days, when you were taking a yak's hair, you wound the long hair around a piece of wood and ripped it out of them. So each and every pore where the hair was taken would be dripping with blood. If you think about that, we're demons, Lama said. In our treatment of animals, we are demons. We steal the milk of cows and other animal mothers, preventing them from properly feeding and nourishing their children, their calves, causing intense suffering both to the mothers and the children. Some animals are less mistreated in this country, dogs and so forth. But most dogs that live in the world don't have very nice lives. Most dogs live rough, live wild, or even if they're part of a human family, are forced to remain outside in all manners of weather. And let's not forget hunting season, Lama said. It's hunting season, which means we can hear the shotguns. We actually hear it. And we know that this means that a deer that has probably never hurt anyone or anything, wouldn't even know how, is losing its life for some person's entertainment. So those are animals, and we do not want to be born as an animal unless you are a bodhisattva who takes intentional birth as an animal for special reasons. You don't want to be born as an animal. So please engage in those means and practices that will prevent that type of birth. Oh, yeah. So we'll stop there for this morning.
Stop there, morning got it. And Law Rams, Hotel. This is to Taki video the Tara. Oh, that's an dedication. Oh, Zonan de Tamji, Zebani, Tone, Nibe, Jana, Banzi.
Chega, Nache,
Ye Bala, Roba, Ye, Sebe, Sole, Roa, Yo. gewa de jewo go sonam yi ge zozo de sonam yi ge le zong tamba ge ni do ba yo zong jo sen ne ren bo je ma je ba na ji je ba me ba da gong ne gong de be wa yo zem je dam je de dan den je je ngin ro dam je da de tong ba le san jo san ba gang da zar yo ba de da gan je mo la ro ba yo zan je re je zhe zhe dam be ga ja gan de ya dan de leng ba sa je me zon de sang a je si ge zon da ja be tra yi yo o la so tu ji ji thank you lo da con của mình nhá cái nó thì cho đi ta ta cho mà thôi